Hi guys, it's Renee and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm continuing my read along of Mordu, otherwise known as silent reading. And yeah, I'm sorry for the really short notice live stream, but honestly with the way today was going, I just didn't actually think I would have the energy for it because I started um, like my dance assessment preparations at 11, and then we finished at 3, and then I had a family thing from 3 until 8. Um, and I took like a very quick nap, and now we're here. Um, so, anyway, I hope you guys all enjoy it. We're gonna see how the energy holds up. Maybe I will only do 2 hours instead of 3. I'm hoping for 3 hours though, because I kind of like did the math for how many um, pages I need to be doing in order to be done with this volume before we go on holiday, and the odds aren't looking good. So also I know the audio is quite soft. I don't know why. I'm hoping it's still okay-ish. But I didn't want to tweak with it too much because I was afraid um, it would mess it up completely. Um, so yeah, I think considering that I started a little bit late, I think we can more or less just get it going, if that's okay. So let me quickly pull up the chat and the chapter. And also just a quick note that I'm planning to do a live stream on when would it be? Either Wednesday or Friday, depending. Um, and then another one on Saturday, and maybe I can squeeze in another one somewhere else as well. Um, yeah, I don't know what to do to fix the audio. I can try a different audio, but it might be a little bit loud. Let's see if this one is any different. It's kind of reading the same on my side, but the last time I tested it, it was weirdly noisy. So I don't know if that's worse. Um, let's see. Okay, I'm not getting any feedback on this one, so I'll just switch back to the other one for safety's sake. I really don't know why it's so low today. It's very strange. Um, okay, we're back to the original now, just to be on the safe side, because I didn't have time to test it. But okay, I've delayed enough. Let me get a pillow. I have tea here with me. We're gonna take a 10-minute break on the hour as usual, and then we will decide at the 2 hour mark whether or not um, the energy is there for another hour. So I hope you guys will still enjoy, and yeah. I can try and pull it just a little bit closer and hope that makes a difference. Okay, chapter 99, Verhovensky 9. Law and Joe had been in a hurry when he left this morning and taken a taxi to the Golor district. When he walked out of the city bureau's gates, an unoccupied taxi just happened to be driving by. His fingers stuck in his pocket, twitched, but somehow he didn't reach out to flag it down. Instead, he waited half a minute for the light to change, then crossed to the parking lot across the street. When his steps fell on the evenly laid out crosswalk, Law and Joe's gaze had already become a scanner, inspecting the parking lot from east to west. and wondering if he expects to see Feidu there. Halfway through his inspection, the self-styled senior officer began to ridicule himself. The human heart was weak. If it had one thing, it always wanted another. Feidu had been seized by a whim to pick him up once, and the second time he was scrambling for everything he could get, looking out for Feidu to come again. Oh my god, I love that. But what if he didn't come? If he didn't come, that didn't mean anything. Lonjo had arms and legs. He was half as tall as a house, standing up, in excellent health, with a healthy appetite. He could take down a whole class full of delinquents barehanded. It was a, uh, it was a piddling 2 or 3. I'm assuming it's referring to biking, but I'm not familiar with that term. Piddling 2 or 3 kilometers to his house. Jogging there and back wouldn't exhaust him. Hoping for someone to come pick him up was really shameless. After all, Feidu had never said he was going to pick him up after work. He hadn't even clearly indicated what was happening between the two of them. Lorenzo was human. Sometimes a human couldn't avoid being covetous, couldn't avoid being endlessly greedy. In the beginning, Feidu had been like a dangerous plant emitting a rare perfume, indiscriminately attracting everyone who passed by. The more Lorenzo's intellect had flashed warning signals, the more attracted he had been. All to so-called seductive people and things on earth. Sorry, all the so-called seductive people and things on earth were probably like this. You knew they were poisonous, but you wanted to go take poison. Then he came to the cataclysm of the bomb and nearly parting forever. Like an invisible dark hand, it had pushed him into the swamp called Feidu. This is a very interesting analogy, but it's also just nice to hear Law and Jules' perspective of this, because he kind of doesn't linger on thoughts about Feidu too much, usually. He wanted to love him, wanted to take care of him, wanted to slowly unwrap his convoluted, unknowable heart, like opening a beautifully wrapped package. Lorenzo had started on a path with his one-sided declaration, had made his preparations for a long and arduous journey, carrying a traveling bag of patience on his back. But he hadn't had him by his side only a few days when the bastard had once again thrown him off his proper pace. It was as if he'd been bewitched. The sudden physical intimacy had made him throw away all his defenses, filling his heart with deep-rooted desires. It had also pushed him onto a roller coaster. All the things he'd originally planned to take his time on had at once become things he was itching with impatience to get on with. Lorenzo was impatient to hear Feidu say he'd been thinking when what he'd been thinking when the bomb on the so-called chain truck had gone off, and why he'd grabbed him. I mean, honestly, I kind of would love to hear that as well. He was impatient to open up Feidu's maze-like chest and see his own progress, see how far he'd gone. Impatient to hear a few sentences of truth come out of his mouth, to hear him own up to all the facts. But this was wrong. Lorenzo understood that. Dealing with a bad guy required quick wits, bravery, and strength. Dealing with Feidu, however, required huge amounts of patience and perseverance. Performing this almost harsh self-reflection, Lorenzo's expectations lowered with every step he took over the crosswalk. When he'd crossed the 10-meter wide road, he'd managed to force his heart, floating in midair, back down to the ground. Lorenzo considered the endurance of that reinforced glass heart, making a surefire mental preparation. He thought, even if he went home now and found that Feidu had run off after sleeping with him, he could very well accept that as a normal phenomenon. Oh, that kind of hurts, actually. Our work for in a nutshell. Um, as for why he let the empty taxi go by at the door and insisted on crossing the road, Lorenzo found himself a reason. He'd been planning to cross the road and buy a bag of roasted chestnuts. Mm-hmm. Thinking this, his gaze burned as it fell on the little roasted chestnut cart, as if he wanted to swallow the peddler's whole pot in one go. Then, the next instant, Lorenzo saw his own car behind the little stand. Fedu had the heating on this time, and he'd also opened the car's window. His elbow was sticking out the window. He was thinking about something. From his profile, he seemed to be staring fixedly at the roasted chestnuts. Mm-hmm. I wonder what. Lorenzo's reinforced glass mental precautions immediately crumbled. He stood a few steps away as if his feet had been glued to the ground. He had been in too much of a rush when he'd gotten up that morning. There was many things that he hadn't had time to think over carefully. Seeing Fedu again after the space of a day, all those intimacies he hadn't had time to dwell on, the feel of his skin, his subtle expressions in the lamplight, their mingling breath. All of it spun through his mind like a running horse lantern. Lorenzo's throat moved gently. He even felt his blood pressure rising. The things you couldn't get enough of after you had a taste truly were one of the great torments of the mortal world. That sentence. Just then, the roasted chestnut peddler's spatula stopped, and he began to hawk his wares. His clear shout travelled far away, simultaneously startling the two of them at a distance of a few meters apart. Fedu's far-wandering mind at last returned. He felt around in his coat pocket, pulling out a bowl. He was about to pass it over through the window. "Excuse me, could I—" Before he finished speaking, he was cut off midway. "If you eat that now, will you have an appetite for dinner? What's your problem?" As if he'd shown up, Lorenzo, pretending nothing was the matter, pressed his hand back. Then, without waiting for Fedu to speak, he said to the roasted chestnut peddler, "I have some change. Give me 2 gin." Fedu, ... Lorenzo took the well-wrapped chestnuts and got into the car. Deliberately looking a little displeased, he said to Fedu, "Didn't come over here to here on purpose. Don't come over here on purpose tomorrow. It's not far for me to walk back. If I hadn't been coming over to buy something, I may have gotten a taxi at the gate. Wouldn't we have missed each other then?" Fedu happily said, "Oh, all right." Lorenzo, ... Was it too late to take back what he'd said? Why did you say it in the first place? My good sir, you really like tempting fate. Um, I love pieced writing. Yeah, no, honestly, her couples have a special place in my heart. But I have to say, I haven't come across a bad Danmei yet with the read-alongs. Not saying that they're not out there, but in terms of the read-alongs, I've been very lucky with all of the writers being really good. He felt rather gloomy, but couldn't show it. Having just established the principle of not eating snacks before dinner, he looked down and peeled a chestnut. After he'd peeled a good number and eaten them, he very benevolently bestowed one upon Fedu. It's not good for your digestion to eat so many. I'll just give you a taste. There's no more for you after this one. Is that like how you're gonna try and handle the situationship that you guys are in? Because I don't think it's gonna go well. Fedu didn't quibble with his idiotic style of being strict with others and permissive towards himself. While he was stopped at a red light, he lowered his head and took the chestnut from Lowenjo's hand with his mouth, licking Lowenjo's fingers in passing, saying ambiguously, "Sweet." Part of me is mourning the fact that we didn't get this in the live action, and a part of me can't believe we even got this in the book. Oh my word. Um, the enemy was again launching an offensive without prior notice. Lowenjo took a direct blow to the chest, nearly coughing up blood out of dissatisfied lust. "Are you looking for trouble? Who was it that passed out last night?" Shots fired! Shots fired! Oh my word! Oh, sorry, I'm realizing I can't afford to not speak directly into the mic tonight because it's already so soft. Feidu didn't care about that. Taking no notice, he was about to continue the seduction when Lu Wenzhou called him to halt. "Shut your mouth." Feidu heard a trace of humiliated anger. He was a cut above in this contest of shamelessness. He laughed silently and obligingly shut his mouth. The only sound left in the car was the babbling radio reading out the roads that were blocked up with evening rush hour traffic. The two of them were temporarily silent, an indescribable atmosphere filling every corner of the car, along with the buzzing heating, almost making it impossible to sit still. Lowenjo gazed at Feidu's profile out of the corner of his eye, suddenly feeling that he seemed to have returned to his distant childhood, to the first time he had ignorantly held the hand of a boy he liked. He could no longer clearly remember whether the hand had been rough or slender. Only the feeling of fireworks going off in his heart was still vivid in his mind. That's actually really sweet. I wasn't expecting that. As he'd grown older and become more experienced, he'd begun to feel that a physical exchange was all there was, as trivial and tasteless as any other bodily function. That vivid glow he'd felt in his chest had never appeared again, as if it had been sealed away by something. Now the monk, Triptaka, oh my word, I wasn't expecting a Journey to the West reference here, had come on his great road to unseal the 5 elemental mountains. The mountain collapsed, the earth opened, and the wild monkey, eating the wind and drinking the dew, gave a great cry, once more seeing the light of day. Lowenjo suddenly said, "Do a U-turn up ahead. Let's go to the drum tower." I had forgotten that we were heading in this direction with the story. Which is maybe a good thing, because I don't know if I would have survived had I gone into this live stream knowing that, or remembering that. As Feidu shifted to the U-turn lane, he said in surprise, "I just heard an update on the radio. Didn't they say that the runaway students had all been found and the suspect determined?" "Oh right," thought Lowenjo. There's just been a murder at the drum tower." He stretched his legs carelessly, saying very forthrightly, "The killer is a suspect who escaped in the National Road 327 serial robbery and murder case. There are many suspicious points here. Oh, I wanted to have another look. Did you read the letter I sent you?" His speech was too earnest, as if this was what he'd meant to say in the first place. Even Feidu was taken in, restraining his playfulness. "Yes," Feidu nodded. "What's the real name of the child who left the letter? What are his relationships with his classmates at the school like normally?" Lowenjo pulled himself together, towing back his soul, which had travelled a circle around the world with difficulty, focusing his attention on the murder at the drum tower. He considered Feidu's words for a moment, then, somewhat doubtfully, said, "His relationships with his classmates? Why do you ask?" Wouldn't the normal reaction be to ask about his relationship with his parents? Because the letter Feng Bin had left on his dormitory desk before running away had been addressed to his parents. It opened, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm leaving you this letter because I worry every day, pondering in pain what I was born for." Ooh, I genuinely don't know which has better description. Lowenjo's sweet and uncomplicated feelings and love for Feidu, for Feidu's or Feidu's hyper-complicated reactions to his realization of feelings. Both. I think they're on equal footing, for me at least. It seemed that because he lived most of the year in a boarding school, his familial relationships were weakened and he felt uncared for. Adding in his adolescence, the stress of his studies, and plenty of other factors, this had produced an emotional break. "Tell me first, otherwise, it's only a letter. I can't interpret too much based on it." The boy was called Feng Bin. In senior year, year one at Yufeng, his relationships with his classmates were all right. According to his teacher, he was an average student, neither good nor bad. His family background is also pretty good, though he's very ordinary in that rich kids club. Pretty good looking, studied music for a few years. Aside from that, there's nothing unusual about him. He fit in pretty well, had no sharp edges. Not one of those boys with leadership qualities, but also not the kind who gets isolated by the whole class. Lorenzo paused. Come to think of it, the children who ran away were all of that type, aside from Sha Nan. And who's Sha Nan? When an underage victim was mentioned on the news, the real name wouldn't be used. Feidu hadn't caught up yet. An eyewitness to last night's murder. Lorenzo explained briefly. The girl is a scholarship student. Her family's finances are rather tight. She may not have any common language with her peers, may be out of place in her class. The evening rush hour was fairly smooth in the Golor district. They reached their destination in less than 20 minutes. "Do you see the little yellow building on the left hand side? That's the convenience hotel where the students were staying the last few days. Another two intersections on there's a BD supermarket. Turn there." As Lorenzo pointed the way, he said, "Last night, close to 9, Feng Bin left the hotel, telling his classmates he was going for a walk. About half an hour later, Sha Nan left too, saying she wanted to buy basic necessities. They met at the crossroads behind the supermarket." Feidu said, "A secret date?" "Mm-hmm. At least he still catches on quickly." Lorenzo agreed. Then his heart moved. Seemingly carelessly, he said, "Did you go on secret dates in middle school?" I think that was right around the time that his mother was having situations. I can't remember all that's been revealed up until this point, so I'm not gonna go into specifics. But yeah, I don't think his mind was in a dating mood at that point. I might be surprised. Feidu was caught off guard. The corners of his mouth instantly stiffened. He'd never had an immature adolescence like that. Fei Chengye wouldn't have permitted it. Fei Chengye had always thought that the body could develop, could mature, could have desires. But if, because of the appearance of some mere hormones, you developed symptoms such as adolescence, developed illusory so-called feelings towards someone, what would be the point? Wouldn't it be as stupid as a dog in heat? You know the worst part? I know there are people like that in real life. After a pause, Feidu immediately adjusted, displaying an ambiguous smile. Shishong, are you trying to ask about my exes? Then, before Lo Wenzhou could answer, he casually said, no, I was attending a public school. There were only a few children from wealthy families there, and I didn't fit in very well. Anyway, there were too many girls who liked me. If I'd chosen one, wouldn't I have been hurting the others? That is such a Feidu defense response. Like, that is so quintessentially him to hide behind a wall that doesn't seem like a wall. I'm fine. Saying so, he slowly rounded the supermarket, stopping the car at the intersection where Feng Bin and Xiaonan had met. The Drum Tower tourist attraction had closed and locked up again. Following the murder, the whole area seemed unusually solemn. The gambling security department had been made an issue of, and the person in charge of the tourist attraction had temporarily replaced the night shift. Even the sanitation workers were working harder than usual. Lo Wenzhou had keenly felt Feidu's momentary unease and looked at him deeply. He didn't blindly press on, changing the subject. The killer started following them here. Feidu rolled down the window, looking all around and frowning. Strange. What is? This place is open on all sides. Feidu lightly tapped on the car window. An ordinary mugger wouldn't choose to have his stake out here. How would you select your target? How could you be sure where the people going by were going to go next? What if they were going to take the next turn onto the main road? The uncertainty is too great. And furthermore, basically all intersections with streetlights have surveillance cameras. Even if he wasn't afraid of being caught on camera, he still wouldn't need to purposefully show himself, would he? Wenzhou understood his implication. You're saying that it's likely the killer knew where the children were meeting for their date, and which way they were going to go, and had staked the place out ahead of time. Lu Guosheng hadn't returned to his original profession. Feng Bin had been his target. But why? When Lu Guosheng had been sent into hiding by a wanted notice 15 years ago, Feng Bin hadn't even been born. What grievance could Lu Guosheng have against him? And how had Lu Guosheng known where Feng Bin and Xia Xiaonan had arranged to meet? And there was also that girl who hadn't been harmed at all. Starting to look more and more suspicious. Okay, just a quick tea sip before we continue. Chapter 100, Verhovensky 10. Feidu stopped the car by the side of the road. The two of them walked the path Feng Bin and Xia Xiaonan had taken, walking towards the east side door of the drum tower. Around the winter solstice, the days were shorter and the nights longer. Night was already beginning. A cold moon partway between the crescent moon and a half moon hung up high by a distant corner of the drum tower, tainted by a bit of clear mist, an echo of the light of the snow on the roof tiles. Ooh! You know, sometimes you just get, and I say this as a point of admiration, you get the vibe that the author was really like feeling a moment, and that description is one of those for me where I'm like, I can feel what you were feeling as you were writing this almost. So the reason they ran away was that their studies were too stressful and they wanted to celebrate Christmas. Feidu tightened his scarf thoughtfully, saying, do you believe that reason? Who hasn't been young once? Little whelps who would do anything. Sometimes it won't necessarily agree with adult logic. He's not wrong with that. Lu Wenzhou absently blocked the wind for him, carefully examining the surroundings. I'm sorry, those small actions of care are just, they get to me. He hadn't had this feeling when he'd come here during the day, but now that it had gotten dark, the whole Drum Tower scenic spot had become a great maze. All the street lights looked exactly the same, stretched out in long lines, like some sort of secret bewitching array in a wuxia novel. Aside from the landmarks of the Drum Tower itself, all the little alleyways seemed to be identical. Even the antique style old shops had their closed doors in about the same positions. There were intersections everywhere. Sometimes you'd run into a street sign or two, like winning the lottery, but their directions were unclear. Walking through here, it was easy to lose track of where you'd gotten to, which probably doesn't help when you're trying to run from someone. The two of them had a good sense of direction, especially Lo Wen-jo. After a good number of years working as a frontline criminal policeman, he had a particular sensitivity towards geographical layouts and human facial features, but despite this, he still felt somewhat disorientated, shuttling along the little streets at the side door. No, come back, it's not there. Wendell turned on his phone's flashlight, considering a rare street sign for a good while, calling back Feidu, who had turned in the wrong direction. Did those two brats really have nothing better to do? What were they really doing there in the middle of the night? Feidu suddenly said, going to the Drum Tower at midnight. The two of them must have been going to see the Lover's Mirror. Feidu knows about it! Ah! Okay. Lowenjo had been standing on the little step next to the street sign, taken unawares. He missed a step and stammered, "What?" Lover's Mirror is one of the city's top 10 scenic locations for a date. It's in the Drum Tower scenic area, Feidu said in surprise. Haven't you ever heard of it? I mean, he has, but I am curious why he didn't think it was a good idea to tell you about it. Luonjo measured others by himself, thinking that if he didn't know something, then no one knew it. He wanted to sneakily lead Feidu over on the pretext of investigating the details. Oh, he planned this. It wasn't just a, oh, we happen to be here, by the way. It's a, oh, I'm specifically taking you there with premeditated motives that are of the romantic variety. Okay, I need to calm down, sorry. And receive certification from the venerable Jade Emperor. But he absolutely hadn't expected this, that Feidu would disregard his proper duties to the extent of investigating scenic locations for dates when he had nothing else to do. This man really was going over there to get the blessings of the Jade Emperor. I cannot believe it. Why would I have heard of a stupid thing like that? Lowenjo said grumpily. I can see your speciality is fooling around with girls and little fools. What does that make you then, Lowenjo? If you spend all day thinking about useless things like this and your company hasn't closed down yet, your resources really must be plentiful. The shade. Feidu was very wronged because this just happened to belong to the small category of things that were his proper business. The Drum Tower's leading attraction for couples was simply and crudely made, but the outcome was extraordinarily good. All the bosses who were thinking of branching out into this sphere had devoted a great deal of thought to studying this issue, among others, and remained perplexed. Feidu not only knew that there was a lover's mirror At the drum tower, he could even recite the annual turnover of the little photo shop next to the lover's mirror. Oh my word, I love that. It's like, no, 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 I wasn't investigating things for personal reasons. I was actually doing my job. After a momentary blankness, he keenly noticed the flustered exasperation in Lowenjo's words. Fedu's heart suddenly moved lightly as he realized something. Fedu exerted all his efforts to manage to keep from smiling, pretending not to know that the investigation was a pretext. They understand each other way too well. I kind of love it. Lo and Joel, meanwhile, felt that he'd done the most idiotic thing possible and determined that he absolutely couldn't let Fedu know, pretending that he was a decent people's police officer and the investigation wasn't a pretext. With the two of them firmly grasping both sides of the pretext, they looked at each other with respectively innocent and upstanding expressions, then averted their gazes, each harboring his own intentions. The atmosphere of the scene is just, oh, I'm living for it. Fedu was very properly said. A full price ticket for the Drum Tower tourist attraction is 20 or 30 yen. Since Fungbin's family circumstances are good, he shouldn't care about a bit of money like that. Choosing to come at night was likely because he didn't want others to find out about his relationship with this girl. Wunjo nodded with a great show of earnestness. Makes sense. What else? Feidu, dot dot dot. The experienced and able President Fei had never before experienced this type of pretending not to be on a dates. Oh, I'm living. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm stopping every 2 seconds. I just can't stop smiling. For a time, he was at a loss for words. Lowenjo said, "Let's go up ahead and have a look. What do you think is the motive for the cover up? Schoolyard romances ordinarily get hidden from teachers and parents. Not many people would hide from the die-hard followers who ran away with them." Feidu went along with his topic, saying two possible circumstances. Either he felt the relationship was beneath his dignity, or it was to protect her. Since Feng Bin expended so much effort to take the girl to see the lover's mirror, I surmise that it's the latter. Oh, so after Lowenjo gave a seemingly absent-minded nod, he suddenly changed the subject. You didn't used to care about getting a little fine for parking against regulations. You were always hanging around, parading yourself at the city bureau's gates. Why is it that lately, when you come to the city bureau driving my car, you're paying attention to the rules and going to the parking lot? Is it the former or the latter? Oh my word. Oh my word. I can't believe he actually asked that. I can't believe he went there. This is such a sweet scene in the weirdest location possible. A murder site, seriously? I mean, that is very them, though. It just. They are this close to being psychos, each of them, in their own way. Feidu paused. Moonjaw raised his eyelids, looking at him, pointing to his own ears. Why don't you take the opportunity to earn up? I'm listening. Neither. Feidu pulled himself together and smiled ambiguously, touching Lowenjo's waist and lowering his voice. Isn't it a public security bureau? I'm afraid I'll be arrested for being an uncertified driver. Mr. Policeman, when are you coming with me to receive certification at the Lover's Mirror? I am not okay. I'm not coping. Lowenjaw, dot dot dot. The asshole had known all along. He'd been playing dumb. Fadu was bothersome as could be, not at all lovable. Sure. Right now, Lowenjo thought that there wasn't a single adorable thing about him, from the roots of his hair to his heels. What had he spent these past few months constantly thinking about her for? This bit of goods was only fit for dragging home, stripping naked and throwing on the bed. I can't with these two. Between the branches of the old trees that had lost all their leaves, you could see the ancient bell on top of the drum tower. The night was limpid. The two of them had finally torn away the seriously damaged pretext, tossing aside this murder case where the murderer was evident at a glance. When I was 15 or 16, I also plotted to run away with a group, though the reason was better than celebrating a Western holiday. KFC or some company like that was putting together a middle school basketball competition, and the prize was a basketball signed by the NBA celebrity, who just happened to be the basketball player I liked. So I got together a group of people, got a sick note from a classmate's cousin who was a nurse, told my parents the school had organized a competitive summer camp, and ran around playing basketball for half a month. Fedu dot dot dot. This was a re- this was a recollection so wretched it really made you sigh in admiration. We did get the prize, and I fooled my mom by saying a classmate had brought it back from abroad. Walking beside him through the peaceful little alley, Lowenjaw took his hand, felt it was cold, and gave him the still warm bag of chestnuts to hold, keeping watch out of the corner of his eye to make sure he didn't sneak away. Later, there was a parent teacher conference. As soon as the teacher talked to my mom, the whole thing came out. When my dad got home and heard about it, he gave me a hell of a thrashing. Fairy thought that a late stage problem child like this couldn't be kept down with simple force. My father, he seemed pretty severe, but he's actually very fair and reasonable, Ondro said. When he got a handle on his temper, he said to me, "A forcibly picked melon won't be sweet. If you don't like going to school, then forget about it. Do what you like." Ondro's ridiculous stories of domestic trivialities had an unbelievable attractive force to Feidu. Each time he occasionally said a few words like this, Feidu felt that he'd encountered a hidden Easter egg. Seeing Lowenjo suddenly stop, Feidu couldn't resist following up. "And then what?" Lowenjo said, "At first I was pretty happy, thinking the old fellow had found salvation and changed his ways. I didn't expect that he would fairly and reasonably stop my senior middle year 2 school fees and allowance." Well, I cut class sometimes. I wasn't really prepared to become a dropout, so I had to go out and earn my school fees when I was on vacation. The old fart was as good as his word. He really didn't give me a penny. I carried water barrels for people for a couple of months for the sake of the basketball. Don't laugh. If he could have preserved the story like a specimen, Feidu felt he could have enjoyed it for half a lifetime. I love how Feidu just enjoys finding out things about Law and Jaw and like getting to know small parts of his life that he hadn't been privy to before, because it's so small, but it makes it feel so much more real. "You always let me take the lead in telling this sort of embarrassing story." Lowenjo poked him with his elbow. "Your turn." Feidu dot dot dot. I don't know if he has embarrassing stories. All of his seem to just be painful, honestly. how Feidu reacts to what a normal family is supposed to be. I think that's part of what attracts him to the stories. There really was nothing fun about his endless upbringing, but he couldn't bear to spoil the mood, so he had to rack his brain for a good while, finally managing to pull something out of his memories that would oblige. Alright, Feidu said, I'll tell you a secret. Lowendraw indicated that he was all ears. Around the Spring Festival one year, I went to pay a New Year's call on a friend. Feidu paused, then said, I saw a bicycle downstairs at his house, a racing bicycle with a gear shift and an especially flashy paint job, with a pattern like a poisonous snake. It seemed to be calling out to me. Moindro somehow felt that the bike he described sounded familiar. It's probably yours, sir. Fado licked his lips, very cautiously arranging his diction. So, I left a New Year's present for it by gluing its back wheels with chewing gum. Lowendraw's footsteps abruptly paused. He'd remembered. During the Spring Festival one year, Taran had been unable to go back to his hometown because his duty schedule had been full, so Lowendraw had ridden his bike over with presents to represent the citizens of Yan City in delivering comfort to the police comrade. Before going, he thought of a certain little whelp with no one to look after him, and had brought along a limited edition game machine to give to Taran to pass on to him. Oh. And I think this is the one that they reference in the show, the gaming console. And assumedly in the novel as well. In the end, he'd stayed 20 minutes at Taran's house, and someone had messed around with his bike, which he left downstairs. Some wretched child had snuck a few small firecrackers to his back wheel with chewing gum. Lowendraw hadn't noticed it when he'd gotten on the bike and reached out to his foot to paddle, and he'd nearly been launched into orbit by the explosions. Maintaining his smile, Feidu guiltily took a small step back. Feidu. President Fei reaped the consequences of the lascivious activity. In order to entertain a beauty, he voluntarily gave himself up to the authorities as one possessed. It was too late for regrets. I love that the beauty and the authority is the same person. He didn't receive any leniency for his confession. Lowendraw grabbed him and gave him a good seeing to. He was pushed against a wall from behind. Feidu said, Wait a moment. Wait for what? Lowendraw laughed menacingly as he held his chin. Rape doesn't have to wait for a spotlight. You just had to go there? Feidu said, There's blood on this wall. Great, my two favorite sentences directly after each other. Lowendraw froze, then immediately let go. Feidu stepped back, his steps somewhat disordered, averting his gaze. His face growing paler. Luckily, the blood on the wall was already dry, so he didn't throw up on the spot. I wonder if we did a counter for every single time poor Feidu was just unwittingly nearby when blood was involved, how far we would get. The hard switch to actual plot, classic priest, 100%. There was a line of blood splatter on the wall that was very easy to overlook on the dark red surface. If not for Feidu's extreme sensitivity to the smell of blood, they probably would have overlooked it. The security camera only caught from Bin and Xiaonan running out of the alley being chased by the killer. Lowendraw touched the blood stain on the wall, then paced around, finding the fragments of the glass bottle in a hidden corner. Fungbin must have been taken completely unaware when he was attacked. He tried to fight back, throwing the snacks and drinks he bought. The sanitation workers must not have noticed and cleaned it up. Pedu lightly rubbed the center of his brow. Fungbin had already been cut when he ran away? Yes. Wonjo nodded. The wound was on his back. His back having been injured, it was likely Fungbin had, at the time, been embracing Shashanan, perhaps even kissing her. Perhaps he'd been making mental preparations the whole way and only at this point had gotten up the nerve to daringly touch the girl he treasured. It's morbidly funny to think that they accidentally reenacted the very scene that Fungbin and Shashanan were in the middle of when they were attacked. Mm. This was a stretch of road where every corner was suitable for kissing. The moonlight swirled. The fresh snow was clear. The street lights frequently drew two people's shadows out together, inseparably intertwined. But this daydream-like scene had suddenly been shattered by a knife. The killer followed them all the way from the intersection. Pedu said slowly. On the path we just walked through there was at least 3 or 4 spots that would have been more ideal for acting, but the killer chose to act here. Why? The first time Fungbin and Shashanan encountered Lu Gusheng, while Fungbin had been cut and the two of them had truly been hard pressed, they'd still escaped. Because just as Fedu had said, the geographical conditions here weren't ideal for a murderer. The other end of the little alley was clear and open, with many branchings. If the two children had run fast enough, they likely would have succeeded in shaking Lugusheng off. Yes, if they hadn't muddled their way back to where they'd started from, perhaps they would have made a smooth getaway. It's always so much sadder for me when it's like, oh, there was hope for a moment there for the victims that they could survive, and then that hope is taken away. If they hadn't come back themselves, Rowanjo and Fedu simultaneously fell silent. The sweet road leading to the lover's mirror, where existential, I'm feeling existential, celestial beings bestowed agreement had suddenly become bone chilling. Any boy who had just kissed the person in his heart could instantly attain the greatest courage of his life. Fungbin hadn't had time to think much. He'd certainly used all his strength to protect Sha Shanan. But what had the girl whose hand he'd been holding so tightly been thinking of at the time? With what kind of gaze had she looked at their joined hands? Just then, an extremely faint sound of soft, rubber-soled footsteps came from the other end of the little alley. Wait, what? Treading almost noiselessly on the ground, only slightly coming to the people's awareness in this nearly stifling silence. Ominous ripples at once spread out through the night. Lowenjo felt a thrill of fear, pulling Fedu behind him. Who's there? Come out. In answer, someone came out apprehensively. It was one of the tourist attraction's patrolman. The patrolman was perhaps somewhat nervous, the flashlight he was holding flashing up and down. What are you doing here? We're closed. The false alarm passed. Lowenjo expressionlessly took his work ID from his pockets and flashed it. Police, I came to have a look. The patrolman let out a long breath and smacked his own chest, squeezing out a polite smile. Oh, all right. I see you're busy. Saying so, he nodded and made a slight bow, making to leave. Wait a minute. Lowenjo called to stop him. Could I ask for your work ID number? Hello. I mean, I appreciate that they still found a pretext to make it as romantically laden in the show as they could. And that's why even though the relationship, not dynamic, pacing changed in the show, I don't mind it because like they gave us so much more than they would have been able to give us otherwise. Um, the patrolman froze, then obediently took off his work card and offered it to Lowenjo with both hands. Whatever you like, officer. Lowenjo calmly looked over the ID number and the photograph, then returned the work card. Aren't you afraid to be patrolling on your own in a place where murder had just happened? The patrolman's manner was unassailable. He smiled openly. The murder didn't happen in this street. The street is sealed off. I couldn't go there if I wanted to. You seemed pretty skittish 2 seconds ago, so if it wasn't because you're afraid of working in an area where a murder just happened, then why were you skittish in the first place? Like that, I feel like it would have been better if he just said he was. Luanjo's gaze swept over the patrolman like the edge of a knife. When the patrolman had been made rather uneasy by his stare, he finally waved a hand, showing he could leave. When the brief interlude had passed, Fadu took up the previous topic. We can't eliminate the possibility that it was coincidence. After all, I nearly also went the wrong way just now. But Luanjo didn't respond. His mind was clearly replaying the segments of security camera footage. The first time Feng Bin and Xia Xiaonan had run out from under Luo Guosheng's eye. Luo Guosheng hadn't expended his effort chasing them. His bearing as he had walked through the intersection had been almost leisurely, as if he was certain his target couldn't get away. I thought that letter of Feng Bin's was very off, said Luanjo, but I couldn't concretely tell where it was off, so I sent it to you. Have you reached a conclusion now? I have something for your consideration. While the letter opens Dear Mom and Dad, the whole of it doesn't sound like it was written for his parents, said Feidu. We're all very anxious. There aren't any truly carefree and peaceful people around us. What we wanted before, we now don't want at all. And there's that line at the beginning, pondering in pain, what I was born for. There's a great number of lines paraphrased from a book called All About Lily Chorchua? I'm not sure. Translated from Japanese. It's a story about the murder that concerns schoolyard bullying. I'm not sure whether he was hinting at something. Luanjo muttered to himself for a moment. Come on, let's go to the hospital. I want to see Xia Xiaonan. At the same time, he sent the worker ID number he'd just seen to Taran, who was on duty for the evening. Contact the person in charge of the drum tower and look into the patrolman with this ID. I love that he doesn't skip any details. Okay. I am quickly going to take my 10-minute break now, and then we'll be back at, let's say, 1/4 for the next hour's reading. fix the volume, but I feel like it's still just the same. Um, so I'm gonna, because what seems to be the issue is I think for some weird reason the mic isn't being registered, um, and that it's actually my computer's audio that you're hearing, and that's why it seems so soft. But I don't know why that's the case. So sorry that you guys are gonna have to like still tolerate this very soft sound. I will continue to try and speak into the mic as if that will make a difference. I don't know. Um, but yeah, okay. I think we can just more or less immediately get started. Um, let me pull the novel up again. Okay. So what I think I'm gonna aim for is page 150 maybe. So we'll see how far away from that we are by the end of hour 2, and then plan accordingly. Chapter 101, Berhovinsky 11. Shashanan. I just had a look at her. She still hasn't woken up. The criminal police officer responsible for keeping watch at the hospital had just eaten dinner and was walking unhurriedly towards the inpatient department. What's wrong, boss? Didn't you say we were going to wait a few days for the child's psychological state to stabilize before questioning her? The sharp sound of car horns came over the phone. Lowen Joe quickly said, Shasha Nan isn't an eyewitness. She's one of the suspects. Get your eyes on her. Huh? Who you're saying Shasha Nan is? Even if she is an eyewitness, she's an eyewitness to a murder, which means that at the very least she might be targeted again to silence her. Like, I don't get why the policeman would just leave her unattended for any reason, even if she wasn't a suspect. Okay. Um, but if that's the case, bear with me, maybe like, hi! Bear with me while I pull my table a little bit closer, because maybe that would make a difference. There might be additional noise because of this. Okay, does that make a difference at all? I don't know. Um, as he pushed open the door of the hospital room, the policeman's voice abruptly came to a halt. Windrow's heart sank. Boss, Shasha Nan is gone. I don't remember this happening in the show, but I'm assuming it did. Crap. Yay, okay, great. We settle for the small things we can. Lowenjo stamped on the Lowenjo stamped on the gas pedal. Yeah, no, it's been a struggle the entire stream so far. This is as good as we can get it, unfortunately for tonight. I don't know what's wrong with my mic right now. Shasha Nan is a local. Her father was called Sha Fei. He had lung cancer and couldn't go out and get regular work. He made a bit of money working snack counters. He died a few years ago. Her mother spent all her time looking after a sick person and a household full of children and the elderly. She must have been rather depressed and taken things badly. She died jumping off a building. Oh, great. Fedu had his phone on speaker. Taran's voice came over the line. All the appraisals this girl has ever given has basically been sensible and introverted, and her grades have always been very consistent. One of those students who goes to class even when she's sick and wears her uniform when she's on vacation. For children like that, studying and attending a good university is the only way to change their fate. Does her family have any involvement with the 327 case or Logo Sheng? No, they're just ordinary common people. Aside from being rather tragic, there's nothing special about her family. The last three generations haven't been near Lotus Mountain. They don't even have relatives around there. I have no idea how she could know Logo Sheng or what kind of grievance she could have against Feng Bin. That would make her want. Mm, sorry, or what kind of grievances she could have against Feng Bin that would make her want him murdered and dismembered. I mean, fair, that's like a pretty extreme step. Lowenjo finished dispatching his troops and hung up his phone. Turning to Feidu, you mentioned schoolyard bullying. Is it possible that Feng Bin was bullying her so she wanted to use every possible means to get revenge? Have you ever had a handwriting analysis performed on Feng Bin's letter? If you're sure that the letter was written by him, then I don't think that's it. The letter doesn't like the letter doesn't seem like the tone of a victimizer, Feidu said. Anyway, wasn't Xiaonan scared? Why am I struggling now? Wasn't Xiaonan scared out of her wits? If she set this up, then her acting is too good. Perhaps out of the habit of being a boss, Feidu had a profound understanding of structuring his words in a way superiors would like. He very rarely brought up messy suppositions to upset others' trains of thought. He would give his conclusion if he had one. If he didn't have a conclusion, he would present a clear analysis of the course of his conjectures. It was very straightforward. Luanzhou looked at him in the rearview mirror and said to Taran, contact their homeroom teacher. Then there's the other runaway students. Get in touch with their guardians and arrange for permission to talk to them. We're almost at the hospital. All right, Taran agreed. Then, somewhat hesitantly, he asked Feidu, what do you mean by the tone of a victimizer? His body language very relaxed. Feidu leaned back in the passenger's seat, the passing lights now bright, now dim on his face. An irrepressible fragrance of chestnuts wafted off the closely woven fibers of his woolen coat. Even when victimizers grow up, learn political correctness, and start to worry that their own children will be bullied, denounce schoolyard bullying in line with mainstream society, when they recall their own conduct from their youth, there will still be some kind of bragging in between the lines of their words. Because subconsciously, they don't believe that that was victimizing. They think it was an accomplishment. So called schoolyard bullying is the final analysis. In the final analysis, is the social order within a community. Hmm. Unless one day they suffer from the same circumstances. But the teacher and parents were all just here, and they were in a public security bureau, Taran said. If people really have been bullying them, why didn't the children tell us? I mean, to be fair, it's like there's no permanency of the police within these children's lives. So if they tell them now, it's like, okay, well, you're gonna I'm gonna tell you now, you're gonna be worried about it maybe for a week, and then I'm still gonna have to face the consequences of telling you on my own once you lose interest in the situation that I've disclosed to you. Um, I think it's very hard to want to come forward if you can't see a clear resolution to like what you telling someone about something would do or accomplish. Fadu laughed. Taranga, a sealed off boarding school can become a sort of ecological environment, forming its own rules and laws. What you think of as the natural patterns of behavior may be inconceivable to others. For example, if you told the ancients 2000 years ago that we actually live on a globe, would any of them have believed you? Law and Joel turned the steering wheel. The hospital was already visible up ahead. At first, they had thought that Shashanan was a surviving eyewitness and hadn't sent too many people to keep an eye on her. They'd only been worried she would have no one to look after her and had left someone to accompany her at the hospital. A group of people from the city bureau was just now hurrying over one after another, the police cars further blocking up the already crowded parking lot. Her grandfather was staying with her, so I went out to have dinner. The police officer who'd been ordered to watch at the hospital looked vexed. The old fellow went to the bathroom while I was gone. He can't move very well, so it must have taken him about 10 minutes, and she ran away. There was a little garden set up in the inpatient department to give the patients a place to move around in. The building's security cameras had caught Shashanan silently leaving her hospital room. She'd crossed the little garden and gone over the stone wall. They didn't know which direction she'd gone in. Shashanan's grandfather's forehead was covered in sweat. He stood, trembling, leaning on his wheelchair, babbling something incomprehensible at length. Seeing that no one could understand him, he simply yelled in his urgency, like an inferior mystical beast that had mistakenly wandered into the human world, ugly and helpless. That's a cruel description. I don't like that. I I can guess what is going through Shashanan's mind, so logically I know I shouldn't blame her for leaving, but I can't help but feel a little bit sour that after her grandfather almost lost her, she still abandons him like this. Um, and again, I get she's a teenager, so that there's also that factor where you're not always thinking outside of yourself at that age. Um, but yeah, it feels cruelly thoughtless. A criminal policeman was about to go up to him. When Joe blocked him. Wait, don't tell him yet. He went up to the old man. The old man cast aside his wheelchair, tottering towards him, shouting a lengthy tirade. Seeing that Lord Joe didn't answer, he at last remembered that he was half a mute and that the person coming towards him couldn't understand what he was saying. Then he tugged at Lord Joe's clothes in frustration, helplessly closing his mouth, and began to cry. Lord Joe patted his hand. Sir, aside from school, where would Shashanan go? The old man moved his stiff tongue, forcing out a long syllable. Home. Just home? Does she never go anywhere to enjoy herself? Are there any friends whose houses she drops in at? Hearing this old man suddenly filled up with sadness. Without any warning, he opened his mouth with its missing teeth and began to wail. The coldest frost of the year sorrowfully descended, covering the longest nights of the year. It was as if a light snow had fallen. Lowenjo went with some people to take Shashanan's grandfather home. Sorry. At the same time, obtaining the old man's permission, he went into Shashanan's room. It was called a room, but actually it was just a bit of space partitioned off, just big enough to put a bed. There wasn't even a door, only a curtain for some light covering. The nightstand was an old abandoned sewing machine. There was a cheap pink plastic pen on it, the only thing in the room that made it look like it belonged to a young girl. There were no surplus cupboards in the room. Her few pieces of old clothing were gathered at the bedside, covered with a piece of white cloth. The space under the bed was full of books, most of them textbooks and exercise books. Not even the ones from elementary school had been thrown away. Fedu bent down and picked up an exercise book to flip through. He saw that all the empty space in it had been written full of notes. The handwriting was beautiful and tidy. In some places it had that there hadn't been enough room to finish writing, and she had even used small slips of paper in layer after layer, making the 200-page exercise book as thick as a dictionary for modern Chinese. He skimmed Shashonan's notes. He could clearly feel that the child's logic wasn't very clear. Any slightly difficult subject required a great deal of analytical notes from her. It was evident that her abilities were rather average. Her constantly excellent grades had come from an investment of time and energy. Lowenjo said, "What do you think?" Taran was right. Fedu closed the exercise book. She really is one of those girls who goes to school when she's sick and wears her uniform on vacation. If Fangbin's murder is connected to her, it's likely she was compelled. Supposing she was compelled, where would she have gone now? She isn't home, and she isn't at the hospital. I sent someone to watch out at the school, and there's no movement so far. This Shashanan doesn't have any friends she could open up to normally. Lowenjo's tone changed. Could she have gone to find the person who compelled her? Find him and do what? Settle the score? Give him a beating or arrest him and bring him to justice? Fedu looked at him helplessly. Shishong, if her way of thinking was like yours, she'd long ago have proclaimed herself hegemon of the school. Who would dare to compel her? Oh my goodness. Lowenjo. ... Fedu's tongue had perhaps achieved spiritual enlightenment. Before, when they hadn't gotten along, even if he'd agreed with Lowenjo's views, he'd agreed in scathing and sarcastic ways. Now that they were getting on, even if his views were different, he could still retort in a way that would put Lowenjo entirely at his ease. Lowenjo's voice softened in spite of himself. Then where could she have gone? So basically, now that they're together, his words are like honey even when he's like scolding him, and I just can't deal that was basically confirmed. Oh, what is Priest doing to me? Fedu didn't answer at once, his gaze searching around Shaonan's little room that was like a snail's shell. He saw a smudge on the tablecloth hung over the broken sewing machine at the bedside, like the mark of someone frequently rubbing it over the years. He pulled away a corner of the tablecloth. It was the box of needles, for needles and thread. There was a small picture frame in the needle and thread box with an old family photograph inside. On the paper backing of the picture frame was written, "For my daughter, Xiaonan." The handwriting looked a little more mature, but was still somewhat similar to Shasha Nan's writing. From ha ma the sound of panting oh came from behind them. Shasha Nan's grandfather had come to the door at some point and was staring at them. From her mother, I'm assuming is what he wanted to say. Just then, the photograph slipped out of the open frame. There was a letter pressed behind it. It was the suicide note Shasha Nan's mom had written before her death. Oh. Fadu slowly looked up. Taran said her mother died jumping off a building. Where did she jump from? Lorenzo gave a jolt of horror. The sound of police sirens swept by, leaving a trail of red and blue after images along the winding highway. Shashanan's mother was called Sunjing. She worked at a junior middle school when she was alive. She jumped off the school's administration building. I've already sent you the address, Tarana said quickly. The fire truck and ambulance will be there soon. What is it with the show and the preference for show novel as well for the preference for suicide? Oh, the 43rd Middle School. In the car, Fadu read through the brief account Taran had sent. The school Shashanan went to. When her mother jumped, Shashanan was at self-study. You could see the classroom from the administration building. Perhaps she wanted to have a last look at her daughter. Damn. Her mother extricated herself, leaving behind a house full of children and the elderly, and she jumped off a building right in front of her child. Wouldn't Shashanan resent her? Why do you think she would follow in her footsteps? It's very common. A person often becomes what he hates most. And there we have Fadu's biggest fear in a nutshell. Fadu shrugged. The more taboo it is, the more attractive it is when a person is desperate. For example, before he could finish, Lorenzo suddenly grabbed his hand. Okay. And that line from Fadu hurts so much if you know how this ends. Not that I even know how the novel ends, but even just thinking about how the show ended, that hurts. Fadu looked up in surprise. Or maybe not hurts, but it does hurt, but it's like also really good foreshadowing. Chapter 102, Verhovensky 12. Fadu looked up in surprise. What's wrong? In that instant, Lorenzo's body had acted faster than thought. Since Taran had started talking about Shashanan's family, he'd been thinking of Fadu, thinking of that summer weekend 7 years ago when he'd opened the door on the room full of withered flowers with the endless song playing upstairs. The quiet and empty great residence had been full of floating dust. When he'd arrived, there had been a grand ceremony waiting for him. He'd gone back there countless times in his dreams. Did Fadu recall her over and over? You don't want to know the answer to that. What was he thinking when his recollections ended? Lorenzo had no idea what he'd been planning to say when it impulsively grabbed Fadu's hand. What could he say? This was a painful memory after all, a scrape on the heart. He couldn't make it better with just a few words. Don't be nervous, Fadu patted his hand. Unless something unexpected happens, my guess is that even if she's standing on the rooftop, she won't jump in the end. I thought you weren't wearing enough just now. There's a padded coat in the trunk. Lorenzo racked his brain for something to say. Go put it on. Fadu had been driving his car for a few days and had never noticed that the lump in the trunk was an article of clothing. He thought it was scraps to use for cleaning the car. Hearing these words, President Fay felt that both his spirits and his eyes had been abused. like an unconventional form of domestic violence. That's a bit extreme, Fedu. He took Lowendraw off. He shook Lowendraw off without another word and hurriedly walked off in his immaculate attire. Lowendraw said, "Wait a minute, I wasn't finished yet. How do you know she won't jump in the end?" His colleague's voice came through his earpiece. "Captain Law, the girl really is on the roof of the administration building." High up, the wind was even more bitingly cold. It pierced to the bone, making a rustling sound as it rubbed past. Shasha Nan's hospital gown was thin. Her skin had already lost sensation. She looked down from on high at the nearly darkened classroom building. She remembered she'd been doing a physics exam then, racking her brains to distinguish the difficult to parse concepts, tearing off a corner of her pen cap. Suddenly the class became agitated. Her desk mate jabbed her with an elbow, shouting into her ear, "Come look, someone's about to jump." Wow. The tip of her pen made a sharp cut in the paper. Shasha Nan's heart swayed. She turned her head and saw a person jumping off the administration building across from them like a heap of ashes that had come out of nowhere. Half the class stood up, falling over each other to get to the window and look, crowding aside Shasha Nan, who had been next to the window to start with. Everyone looked, only she didn't dare. Until the police had belatedly come to clean up the scene, Shah Shanan hadn't known who had jumped, and she hadn't had time to take a last look at her. In all the 15 years since her birth, this delicate featured young girl had lived the words "didn't dare" written large. She didn't dare to step forward bravely, didn't dare to open her mouth to demand a share in her family's burdens. She always wanted to pretend she was an ordinary girl like the others, who could block up her ears and study, ignoring what was happening outside the window. She didn't dare to speak up for others, and she didn't dare to speak for herself. She didn't dare to resist all the unreasonable bullying and humiliation. Her past life had only taught her to be silent and exercise restraint, waiting for the inconsistent wind of fate to blow the bad things away. But fate never sent charcoal in snowy weather. It could only pile frost on top of snow. She also hadn't dared to run off with that simple minded boy. That's a cruel analysis of a person who died protecting you. Hadn't dared to throw away her phone. Hadn't dared to come out of the garbage bin. When everything was over, she hadn't even dared to go look at Bang Bin. As long as she didn't face up to that, she could pretend that it had all been a nightmare. None of it had happened. Shah Shanan held the ice-cold guardrail with both hands, her palms tasting the raw sweet rust. A long string of tears falling from the top of the 8th floor. Lowendraw clipped on his walkie-talkie. "Don't turn on the sirens. Tell the fire trucks and ambulance to keep quiet too. Take care not to startle her. Anyone with quick reflexes who's good at talking, get ready to go up with me. Move fast. Is the air rescue cushion ready?" Hi. Yeah, just a quick warning. The audio today is very bad. My mic isn't working. We're working with the laptop audio without me having realized it for the first half of the stream. So sorry, but it's gonna be very very quiet. But we're persevering. There was something I wanted to mention. Oh, I was gonna say it would be nice if Feidu could go up with him, but I don't know how good Feidu's reflexes are. I just know he's good at talking. Police, firemen, and medical personnel crowded around on all sides, turning the courtyard of the school, after um, which had been peaceful after school had let out, into a pot of porridge. The manager of the administration building was scared to tears. Feidu silently avoided the crowd, walking towards the classroom building across from the administration building. After he'd gotten the keys from the manager and asked for information, he walked directly into the junior middle year 2 class 6 classroom, which I'm assuming is where Xia Xiaonan was when she saw her mom fall. Well, when her mom jumped. The classroom was deserted. A negligent student on duty hadn't cleaned the blackboard entirely, leaving a corner of writing that seemed to be an algebra problem. Feidu looked out the window and turned on the classroom's lights. Then he opened the window, facing the girl who was already standing outside the guardrail. Xia Xiaonan had been staring at the classroom all along. She hadn't expected that the lights would suddenly turn on inside it. For a moment, she panicked. At the same time, the highly efficient firemen had quickly filled out the airbag that were trying to guess where she would fall. Luo and Zhou, taking along a group of firemen and criminal police officers, went out on the rooftop. The long, neat hem of Feidu's coat was blowing behind him from the window, his sleeves flying up. He narrowed his eyes, meeting the gaze of the girl on the rooftop, who was at her wits' end. Yeah, and I appreciate that he actually, you can see him studying it and uh, kind of learning things through his own sessions with therapists as well. It makes it feel so much more grounded and believable that he has such a good understanding of it. I don't doubt that it also is in part just a innate understanding that has come through from years of having to walk on eggshells around his father. Um, but an intuitive understanding like that can only really take you so far. So I appreciate that he also has the backup of genuinely having studied it. It's not just, oh, he's just talented. He just woke up like that one day. Even though with Feidu, I could believe it. Mm. Young lady, Luonjo, arriving on the rooftop, addressed Xia Xiaonan from afar. It's too windy. You should be careful. Xia Xiaonan's body suddenly shook. She grabbed the railing with both hands and swiftly turned her head. She didn't speak, instead letting out a scream. Luonjo put his hands in front of his chest, spreading them open for her to see, very gently making a gesture of pressing down. If a person comes to the point where she wants to jump off a building but can't say a word about it to anyone else, don't you think that's a pity? Little girl, you can actually speak, can't you? Xia Xiaonan didn't speak. Her cold little face was white. She looked at him expressionlessly, then turned her head back to the lit up classroom. Feidu smiled at her, pointing to the seats lined up against the window. When he'd counted to the fifth one, he pulled out the chair and sat down, opening the window next to him. A junior middle school student's seat was rather small and narrow for a long-limbed adult man. He curled his legs up awkwardly under the table, propping his elbow on top of it. Xia Xiaonan's gaze had followed him involuntarily. Now she gave a start. That was the seat she'd sat in before. Luonjo quickly made some gestures. While Xia Xiaonan's attention was focused elsewhere, a few policemen and firemen separated and moved in towards her. This way, her movements would be constrained within a very small area. Even if she really did jump, probability that the air rescue cushion could catch her would be greatly increased. That's actually really smart. Luanjo lowered his voice and said into his walkie-talkie, "She's on the west side of the roof, about a meter and a half from the corner. Rescue workers on the 7th floor move into position." Okay, this is not a tangent that I should be going on considering our time constraints, but I'm gonna do it anyway. um, I really appreciate when it's very clear that attention to detail is being paid where things like police work is involved, because it shows a level of experience, it shows a level of competency within the characters that, you know, would not have been as prominent if these small details were omitted. And that's the kind of small details that really earns my trust as a reader, because it's like, okay, this feels real. This feels like something a police officer would actually know to do. These are the kinds of things they might consider if this was a real scenario. And I'm not gonna name names, but if you're on my Patreon and you watch that reaction, you might know which one I'm talking about. But there was a show that had a big focus on police work, and there were so many times where I was pulled out of the story because there were simple things that the characters did that would, in a real life situation, put a case in jeopardy in a very, very obvious way, that was very frustrating to witness, because it's like, you if you have watched police dramas before, these are rudimentary things that most people would know at this point. So to see them being disregarded within a narrative for the sake of the story was very frustrating, especially because the focus on the police work was so big. So anyway, that just had to mention that. It's hard-earned skill both from all his life experiences and actual studying the subject. Yes. Okay. Luanjo lowered his voice and said into his walkie-talkie, "She's on the west side of the roof, about a meter and a half from the corner. Rescue workers on the 7th floor move into position." Copy. The voice had just come over the walkie-talkie when firemen climbed out of the windows on the 7th floor western corridor and waited tensely for orders in case she fell. The firemen on the ground were holding up the air rescue cushion, constantly making slight adjustments to its position. "My mom jumped from here," Shah Shaonan was silent a moment, looking towards the lit-up classroom, then finally spoke. When she wasn't screaming, her voice was soft and sweet, a touch nasal, seeming very gentle. "Stay away from me." The criminal policeman, stealthily drawing nearer, simultaneously looked at Law and Joe. Law and Joe gestured for them to stop. While they couldn't get close, at least their position meant she couldn't go that way. "We know. It really was a tragedy. Are you planning to follow in her footsteps now?" Law and Joe said. "Little girl, what trouble are you in?" But Shah Shanan didn't answer him at all. She only whispered, "If I jump, it'll all be over." "You're wrong," Nonjo sighed. "I really ought to let my medical examiner comrades come over to give you the pop sci explanation. Jumping isn't a sure thing at all. Do you know what happens after?" "If you fall from here, you'll become an uncontrollable falling body. You won't necessarily fall head first, and you may not die immediately. For a minute, or even a few minutes, you'll be able to clearly feel the pain of all your bones being broken, your organs being pierced. You'll be a bloody mess on the ground, in 10,000 times more pain than now." I mean, if if you're a girl who, by your own admission, wouldn't dare to do any of the other things that you haven't been able to do, maybe don't dare to commit suicide. Like, let the fact that you don't dare work for you for once instead of against you. One of my favorite examples is that priest actually shows various clues the cops follow that don't actually lead somewhere, because that happens in real life. Not everything is neatly packaged up. Yeah. If you don't die immediately, according to regulation, of course, we'll have to do everything we can to save you. The probability of survival would be very small, so according to regulations, we'd basically be adding to your suffering. It'll leave you no dignity and a rather ugly sight. Then the medical examiners will hastily stitch you up into a human like appearance and notify your grandfather to come identify the body. Lowendraw said, "But that's alright. He has experience anyway. He's identified too many bodies in his life." You know, this is cruel, but it at least, if she does decide to go through with it, she's going through with it, actually being forced to think about the consequences of her actions. Because her not thinking about the consequences of her previous actions is what led to Van Bin dying. So, yeah, I don't begrudge Lowendraw laying it out for her like that. Shah Shanan kept staring at the lit up classroom, choked with sobs. The firemen at the seventh floor window climbed up a few meters like geckos approaching Shah Shanan, while the policeman on the roof narrowed the ring of encirclement a step. Lowendraw exchanged looks with his colleagues, then carefully walked another few steps forward. Another step forward. If you're in some difficulty and you don't say it now, you won't have an opportunity to say it later. You aren't even afraid of death, so what's the point of keeping a secret? Shashanan at last turned her head to look at him. She hated me. That's why she jumped from here. Everyone had thought she would say something related to Feng Bin. They hadn't expected the girl to suddenly say this. For a time, they all stared. Just then, Lowendraw's phone vibrated. He saw that Feidu had sent him a voice message. Feidu unhurriedly said, "Standing where she is, Shah Shanan will have discovered by now that before her mom jumped, she was watching her, waiting for her to look up, then jumping on purpose so she would see." Here I was giving her mom the benefit of the doubt. It's honestly horrible. And I can't blame Shashanan for feeling that, considering her mom wanted her to see her die. She must have hated her. I'm not saying she must have hated her, but I can understand why she would think that. Lowendraw looked in horror at the classroom building across from him. Feidu said, "Otherwise, there are hundreds of thousands of tall buildings in the world. Why did she choose this one? Why did she have to jump in this direction?" Lowendraw said to Shah Shanan, "Who hated you? Your mom?" "She hated me." Shah Shanan pointed to the classroom building. "She was looking at me like this. I didn't know for how long. Until someone in the class noticed her. Until I looked up and saw her. She wanted to jump so I could see. To show me that she was finally free of us." I get that logic, unfortunately. My dad and my grandfather were sick. All the family's money was spent on them. In the end, they couldn't do any more chemotherapy. They could only buy traditional medicine from some quacks, go with conservative treatment. At night, there was only a curtain door separating me from them. Often I heard my dad in so much pain that he couldn't sleep, tossing around, moaning and groaning, waking my mom. She'd have to get up and take care of him. Then she'd cry nonstop, asking. Aside from her job at the school, she had another job. She worked day and night to earn money, and when she got home, she couldn't even sleep well. Sometimes my dad said, "If you really can't take it, then let's get divorced. We won't be a burden on you." But I was afraid. If she was gone, what would I do? Who is the we in this situation from the dad? Like, that is the weirdest sentiment I've ever heard because it's one thing for the dad to be like, "I don't want to see you suffer. Let's get divorced. Please take Shannon and, you know, live a better life separate from me." That's one thing. But to be like, "Okay, you leave us and Shashanan will be my caretaker. Let me parentify this poor kid, um, and put all the burdens that I want to take off of your shoulders onto hers." Because that's the way it's reading right now, and I don't know if that's how you meant it. Because the thing is, this makes it sound like Shannan didn't think her mom would take her with. Shashanan lowered her gaze, looking at the only illumination nearby. She felt she was standing upon the clouds, in an unreal place, so she involuntarily pulled out the word she had buried for many years. I knew she had insomnia, weak nerves, depression, but when my dad said that they should get divorced, I would run out crying, begging her not to abandon us. Whenever she couldn't stand it anymore and poured something out to me, I wouldn't listen. I was afraid that if I listened, I'd have to take responsibility. The sad thing is, like, I think all teenagers know that feeling of like not wanting to know something because knowing it means you have to acknowledge it and acknowledge the effect that that might have on how you interact with the world. Um, so that feels so like relatable and real and raw, even if it's not fair to her poor mother. I'd only fob her off. Every time I'd tell her, "Mom, I don't understand any of this. I'll study hard and in the future I'll get into a good university, find a good job, and you'll be able to rest and live in comfort." As Shashanan said the last few words, she was sobbing almost too hard to speak. The rooftop's railing creaked and she shook. Rowanjo immediately responded, "So you want to imitate her now? Cast off the encumbrance of your grandfather? You think he doesn't have the good grace to die? That he's a burden on you? So you're taking revenge on him?" Shashanan shook her head hard. Again, like, that's a cruel way to word it, but that is undoubtedly, well, not undoubtedly, but that is a real possibility of how the grandfather will view her dying. Like, "I wasn't good enough to keep her alive. I was a burden. I drove her to this." All those thoughts that people just can't help but have when this happens. Oh, let me not get emotional. Lorenzo purposefully made his voice cold, but from how it looks to us, That's just what you mean to do. Otherwise, what other meaning is there in your falling down and turning into a bloody pulp? Is there any meaning to death? Shah Shonan said loudly. If she can escape, then why can't I escape? Because Feng Bin is waiting for you over there, Lo Wenzhou said. He died with a grievance. Have you thought about how you're going to explain yourself to him? Shah Shonan, you can escape the living, but do you really think you can escape the dead? Ooh. Feng Bin seemed to be a taboo name. Shah Shanan once again lost control and began to scream. But while she was standing outside of the guardrail, her hands were tightly holding the railing. Wenjo took notice of her body language and realized that Fei Du had been right. At the critical moment, this girl didn't have the courage to make the leap. He decisively waved his hand. At this time, the fireman nearest to Shah Shanan had already gotten within 5 meters of her during their conversation. The fireman immediately charged out and grabbed Shah Shanan's arm before she could react. Shah Shanan screamed, nearly losing her balance. The other two firemen, who'd been hanging outside the 7th floor, encircled her, one on each side. Like a helpless worm, the girl was brought down from the rooftop by the crowd, the sound of her crying breaking into the whistling night wind. Luwenjo walked over and looked towards the classroom. Luwenjo walked over and looked towards the classroom building across from him. He saw Fei Du, one hand in his pocket, rather calmly closing the window, gesturing towards him from a distance. There are hundreds of thousands of tall buildings in the world. Why did she choose this one? There's an eerie similarity in this to Fei Du's mother's death. Like, why choose the one day that her son was gonna be home, that he would be discovering her? You know, it just same kinds of questions. What kind of mother would choose that time? Leave her corpse for her child to find on purpose. Thank you, yes. Yes. She hated me. Oh. She. From the next building over, Lowenjo responded to the WeChat message Fei Du had sent him. Shah Shanan said her mom hated her. Is that true, or did you use some kind of trick to make her misunderstand? It's true. Fei Du, who'd just been calm and charismatic, was so cold his fingers were fumbling. With forced poise, he managed not to shiver like a quail, leaning against the classroom heater when he closed the window. Of course, a long-term depressive mood was the main cause, though when a person's mental condition is extremely unstable, she'll make all kinds of cries for help towards her friends and family. If she doesn't get a response, it'll be adding frost on top of snow for her. In extreme circumstances, she'll even hate those close to her. Okay, I want to take a moment to talk about this because it's interesting to me in the sense that I understand why they decided to remove the suicide scene, because it so closely mirrors the scene with the first case's mother. But I also understand why Priest included it, and I do think that even though it makes sense that they had to remove it from the show because of time constraints, it leaves a big puzzle piece out of why Fei Du feels the way he does. Like, okay, this is gonna be a spoiler, so I'm just gonna put my hand up, and if you haven't watched this show in its entirety or read the novel in its entirety, well, that I can't vouch for, but the show specifically, don't listen right now. I'll lower my hand when I'm done talking and you can unmute or whatever. But basically, there is enough that as an audience member you infer why Peisu feels the way he does at the end of the show when he comes to the realization that his conclusion about his mother's feelings for him has been wrong all along. Um, and you understand why he might think, okay, she hated me, but there's never a clear layout of his thought process in the show in the way that we're basically getting here. Here it's very clearly saying how Shao Nan is feeling about her mother is how Peisu assumes his mother felt about him. So yeah, that like I do think that removing the scene was a little bit of a loss for getting even greater context as to Peisu's thought process. But I understand why they had to do it for time constraints purposes and, repetitive Mrs. sake. And I think that they kind of got away with it because it's so normal to feel like, okay, well, I wasn't a good enough son and that's why she left me. Um, but getting this very clearly distilled point A, point B, point C logic is great. Um, okay, sorry, that was a lot. I feel like I maybe overanalyzed that a bit, but yeah. Okay, where were we? I'm wondering if maybe I should just power through till we get to page 50, but that's like 12 pages away. That might be a bit much. Would you guys like a quick break, or are we just gonna soldier on and hope my voice doesn't die? um, okay, let me at least finish this page while you guys decide whether we should continue. Lowenjo typed into his phone, "Last time you said you knew how your mother died, so she..." At this point, he looked at Feidu's figure leaning beside the window, saw the whole building silent, all the classrooms sunk into sleep in the darkness, and him standing alone in the small sliver of lamplight. Lowenjo's fingers paused, and he deleted what he'd just typed. Just then, a voice call came from Taran. "We've rescued Shashanan," Lowenjo said. "We're bringing her back." "Yes, I know," Taran said. "I wanted to tell you that I just got an answer back from the Drum Tower tourist attraction. They investigated the policeman you mentioned. They really do have such a person. The work ID number and the name match, but not the face, I'm assuming." Lowenjo raised his head. Taran said, "The patrolman ought to be a woman." Okay, I'm gonna take this as my cue to take a quick break. Um, so we'll be back at 23 past, maybe 25 past, depending on how quickly I work. And then we are finishing up until page 150. So I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, we're back. Let me quickly rearrange everything again. It's a good thing that we took the break because when I looked up, I realized my battery was about to die. So the break was very necessary to to change batteries and keep the stream going. Um, I would have had to stop in any case to do that at a much less opportune moment. So, yay, okay. Let's buckle down for 13 more pages. Chapter 103. Verhovensky 8. 18? No, 13. My bad. Shah Shanan had been rescued, but her connection with the strange case of Feng Bin's murder remained hidden in a dense fog. What had the mysterious patrolman been up to? Why had he wanted to get into the drum tower scenic spot, and why had he followed Lo Wenjo and Fei Du? This all defied understanding. But it does mirror what happened to Feng Bin and Shah Shanan minus the like running away from the police or patrolman part. So slash murder part. So I feel like that should show them how easy it was for Feng Bin and Shah Shanan to be followed in the first place. The moon and stars had been fine, and perhaps the Jasper Lake had been frozen over, and all the wintering immortals had come to surround the lover's mirror. At first, they had only wanted to watch a courtship in this romantic setting, not expecting that this lover's mirror had been truly shoddily manufactured. Midway through, the mirror. Sorry. Midway through, the channels had gotten mixed up, and a grim, bloody crime thriller had been inserted. The crowd of immortals had in unison found their appetites gone, and uncompromisingly pulled up a double handful of black clouds, covering up the bright starry sky, leaving it as murky and dark as the bottom of a pot, each scattering. Ooh, that's a beautiful description. By the time Lo and Jo and Fei Du returned home after dealing with the problem of the girl jumping off the building and getting Shah Shanan settled in the mortal world, even the romantic setting in the 8 o'clock time slot were about to sing their last notes. Lo and Jo was so hungry he felt that even the air had thinned out a little. As soon as he opened the door, he was thrown off by finding that while his belly was empty, Lo Yuko's food bowl contained both dry food and a can of cat food. The hard-hearted old cat had eaten and drunk its fill and licked itself glossy and was sprawled on its cat bed. Hearing the sound of the door, its sharp ears turned in half circles, but it paid it no mind, let alone coming out for greeting. I'm assuming like Fei Du completely overly fed the cat, like just was like, okay, well, I don't know how much cat food he needs, so here. Lo and Jo gained a deeper understanding of his position in the household. It turned out that what Master Lo welcomed every day was a walking meal ticket. As for the useless two-legged litter box attendant himself, it didn't have any interest in him at all. As soon as it had something to eat, it didn't care where he went or whether he lived or died. I know that's what it might feel like sometimes with pets, but honestly, it's never truly the case. Other living beings would be alright missing a meal. Lo and Jo was only worried about the patient going hungry. When they just brought Shah Shanan down, he'd wanted to tell the patient to leave, but Fei Du had been unwilling. Seeing that it was already so late, Lo and Jo had wanted to stop somewhere to buy takeout on the way, Feidu hadn't said what he wanted to eat, only making nitpicking comments about every restaurant along the way, the implication being that he was equally unwilling. I wonder why he's making this so difficult for Loanjo. You just had to come home to eat. What is there to eat at home? Will kongi and salted vegetables suit your tastes? You're a bigger problem than even Lo Yigo. As he complained, Lo and Jo hastily put a bowl of washed rice into the freezer to chill, then started to chop meat and preserve eggs, setting up the pressure cooker in a flurry. He irritably scolded Feidu, who was standing by idly. And you're as much in the way as Lo Yigo. Clingy baby Feidu, I like that description. Feidu, holding his game machine in his hands and walking around aimlessly, and Loigo, who was at some point had come over to observe human cooking, one standing and one crouching, turned their gazes on him at the same time. I can imagine the twin cat-like looks so clearly in my mind. Lo and Joe looked back at the two of them. Within half a minute, he was utterly routed. Having been defeated, he ungrudgingly went to work. Ungrudgingly, you say? Feidu could race motorbikes in a rainstorm with a crowd of aimless rich kids, could party with his drinking buddies until the middle of the night, could spend money like water, could spout a mouthful of glib talk. Clearly, he ought to have been flamboyant to his heart's content, but at the same time, he was excessively controlled and reserved. Whether he was laughing or angry, the majority of it was brought out for show. Any real emotion was like a trace element that you needed a special instrument to get an inkling of. Lorenzo turned his naked eyes into microscopes, faintly discerning something that might have been his own mistake. Lorenzo felt that Feiru was sticking to him a little, just a little, about the viscosity of rice boiled soft. He's like, the barest amount, but I feel it. Perhaps having crossed paths with Sha Nan, who'd kept saying she hated me, internally he wasn't nearly as untouched and unassailable as he seemed. At Lowenjo's direction, Feidu took up a small cutting board and set about mixing the salted vegetables. The salted vegetables were leaf mustard brought from the store, which needed to be chopped up thin, then mixed up with cilantro and chili pepper, then have sesame oil and other such condiments added. A personal version of the northeastern dish, tiger vegetable salad. It's not something I've ever heard of. No matter what you had him do, Feidu would learn it very quickly, remembering when you'd said it only once and soon getting it right. Only his knife work was a little lacking. He kept having to pause to look around for the right angle for the knife. The vegetable knife came down against the cutting board time after time, the sound almost carrying an echo, unusually hypnotic. When Lu and Jo had used the pressure cooker to cook a pot of his own version of preserved egg and lean meat congee and steamed some frozen buns, Feidu had just finished chopping a small amount of leaf mustard. Loigo looked out from on top of the oven, staring curiously at Feidu, observing what he was doing but not daring to rashly make trouble in front of him. With his arms crossed over his chest, Lowenjo watched his Master Fei and Master Cat. His heart, left behind on the icy rooftop of the administration building, finally seemed to return to his body, slowly sinking into his chest, producing a flower, the scientific name of which was calm. Such a beautiful description. While Feidu was going back and forth over a chili pepper with a vegetable knife, Lo and Joel suddenly spoke, seeming casual. Hey, do you want to stay here with me after this? Feidu's hand slipped, and the knife fell, cutting the chili pepper into half on the cutting board. Or at least it's not cutting him. The chili pepper, which had died unfulfilled, sprayed a pungent grievance upon the heavens like a biological weapon, simultaneously drawing a round of sneezes from Feidu and Lo Igor, their eyes watering from the spice. Lo and Joel had been prepared, dodging a meter dodging a meter away, laughing like a dog. Then he seized the opportunity to cover up his question just now, laughing merrily as he passed Feidu a box of tissues. Feidu turned his head and fixed his reddened, streaming eyes on Lo Windraw's somewhat flustered figure, having an impulse to answer, "All right," but as soon as he opened his mouth, he couldn't help turning his face away to sneeze again. The momentary impulse, like a weak flame in a storm lantern, died invisibly after having risen silently. First thing the next morning, Lo and Joel was called down to the forensics department. The results had come out on the analysis of the blood on Shah Shanan's backpack. The blood really was Feng Bin's, and there was also a hidden bloody fingerprint on the inside of the strap of the backpack that perfectly matched Luo Guosheng's fingerprints as recorded in the system. Okay, well, if we had any doubts before. So when Luo Guosheng finished killing Feng Bin, he hauled Sha Shan'an out of the garbage bin, searched her bag, took her money and cell phone, and then gave the bag back to her? Asked Taran. As Taran spoke, he was helping to block Lang Chao, while His Majesty wasn't paying attention. The wretched eldest princess was miserably swapping buns all around. But I still don't think Shashanan could be an accomplice. Just think about it. Don't you think it would be terrifying? Never mind the little girl. If I wasn't a police officer, I definitely wouldn't dare to have dealings with a vicious person like Luo Gusheng. And there's the suspicious patrolman. After parting with her last cilantro-filled bun, Lang Chao stuck out her head and put in a word. At first, I thought he was part of Luo Gusheng's group and was pretending to be a patrolman to come clean out the blood on the crime scene. But now I thought about it, and what would be the point of cleaning up the blood? Luo Gusheng came face to face with Sha Shan'an. We'd come to that conclusion as soon as we ran an analysis. He didn't even bother wearing gloves to commit a murder. Why would he care about a bit of blood at the crime scene? But when Joe looked at her, and Lang Chao quickly drew her head back, not daring to come into his line of sight again. She'd been racking her brain for an age, and she truly couldn't think of what she'd done to offend their boss. She simply felt that the gay guy's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea, entirely impossible to. Oh, wait! I remember what she did wrong. Okay. Impossible to find under any weather conditions. I was like, why? Why is he mad at her again? My bad. Lang Chao felt for a time that her future was lightless and without prospects, and wished to exchange one gay boss for another. For example, the domineering Director General Fei was alright. Oh my goodness. How is Sha Shan'an? I'm going to try having a talk with her in a while, Taran said. Alright, I just contacted the teacher at Yufeng, and those students. The teacher didn't say anything and agreed to come over after class, but none of the students' parents are very willing. You may need to talk to them again. When someone else's child got hurt, a parent would naturally have some fear after the fact. But if, because of this, a public security bureau started summoning their own children for questioning day in and day out, that would be truly unpleasant. Understood. Lowenjo sighed. If they're really unwilling to come over, we'll go make house calls one by one. First, let's go question Shah Shanan. Shah Shanan was sitting there quietly, like a lantern with a picture of a girl on it, drawn in fine lines, vivid and realistic, but still only paper. If you weren't careful for a moment, she could be burned to ashes by the flame. She looked at Taran and Lowenjaw, not making a sound, then lowered her head again, her messy shag-cut hair drooping from her temples, falling onto her shoulders. Lowenjaw was rather was mm, my brain is telling me that should be Lowenjaw was rather an expert, but let's just read it the way it's written there. Lowenjaw was rather expert at dealing with the utterly evil type, but seeing Shashanan, he felt his head swell and thereupon ceded the chords to Taran. I am very keen to see Taran handling this. I think I remember enjoying it in the show as well, if this is the scene I'm thinking of, but I might be misremembering. Shashanan, right? Like a well spoken elective teacher, Taran sat down across from her, a kindly look on his face, flashing his work ID. I'm called Taran. I work in the criminal investigation team. I'd like to clear up a few points with you. Shashanan didn't look up, as if she hadn't heard, focusing her whole attention on picking her nails. An hour later, Taran walked out of the interrogation room in utter helplessness. Okay, clearly not the scene I was thinking of. It was as if Shashanan had a snail shell on her back. If there were signs of trouble outside, she'd retreat inside, trembling with fear. If you used soft words to try and persuade her, she wouldn't make a sound. If your manner was a little more forceful, she'd cry. Her crying was heart-rending. At one point, she nearly went into shock. Taran was at a loss. He'd had to send Dojo, playing bad cop, out to the observation room midway. From a certain point of view, she could be called unmovable, either by force or persuasion. From beginning to end, she only nodded her head 3 times. The first was when Taran asked, "Were you there when Feng Bin was murdered?" The second time was when Lo and Joel lost his patience with her evasiveness and asked, "Did you collude with the murderer ahead of time? Otherwise, how would he have managed to trap you guys in those complicated little streets?" The third time it was when Taran asked her, "Do you know who wanted to hurt Feng Bin?" This time, Shashanan gave a clear answer. She said, "It was me." Okay, let's see. As soon as the words "it was me" left her mouth, she collapsed. Her nerves as thin as gossamer, like an old computer that was about to be scrapped and would crash as soon as you tried to play Spider Solitaire and wouldn't turn on again after. As for why she'd want to hurt Feng Bin, how she knew Logo Sheng, where the wanted criminal had gone after doing his business, they could get nothing out of her. People who got involved in this kind of vicious crime, provided they weren't demented psychopaths, would often disavow involvement. Even if they couldn't succeed in disavowing, they would subconsciously describe themselves as helpless victims. Pleading innocence and shifting responsibility were common human reactions. They'd very rarely admit things so openly, unwilling even to make up a motive. Shasha Nan's grandfather was waiting in the corridor. After his granddaughter had been brought to the police security bureau, The old man had finally noticed something was off. He'd asked around everywhere and managed to pin together some of the circumstances. He was frightened and overwhelmed. Seeing Taran and Lowenjaw walking towards him, he immediately stood up as a loss, like a student who'd done something wrong. Taran poked Lowenjaw with his elbow. Go talk to him. Hearing this, Lowenjaw turned tail and ran. Director Lee! Here, Director Lee, I've been looking for you all day. Have you found the materials I've asked for yesterday? I need them in a hurry. Taran, ... Bastard. Because Shah Shanan was unwilling to cooperate, the whole case had reached another impasse. Towards evening, the criminal investigation team, having come up empty after a whole day's bustle, put their heads together in the conference room. The little girl won't say anything aside from admitting over and over that she was the one who caused Feng Bin's death. When Shah Shanan's mood had stabilized, Lang Chao had also gone to talk to her. Also, getting at it in a roundabout way, I found out that she has no idea that Lo Gusheng is a wanted criminal who ran for it 15 years ago. When I mentioned him, she started to shake, not reacting even when she peeled back her nail. It was real fear, not faking. Oh, I'm just suddenly reminded of the visceral discomfort of watching her destroy her nails in the show. Oh, sorry. Their homeroom. Let me try and focus again. Their homeroom teacher just came over to talk to me. Taran came in with a notebook under his arm. She said that since Shah Shanan's grades were good, her disposition is quiet and gentle, and she's pretty. There are quite a few boys in class who liked her, but she's never seen her get close to anyone. Not the girls either. The atmosphere in their class is very good. Everyone is very friendly, hanging out all the time at school, like one big happy family. There, there's no bullying. That sounds a little bit too good to be true, but sure. Young Charles said, a teacher wouldn't necessarily know whether there was bullying going on at school, though. No. Xiao Haiyang pushed at his glasses. A teacher might not know about trivialities like individual fights and targeted attacks, but if there was long-term collective schoolyard bullying, she'd definitely know what was going on. Unless she's a young teacher who just graduated and has no experience at all. Either the schoolyard bullying really is non-existent, or the teacher is lying. Shah Shanan's political examination was sitting on Lo Wenjaw's desk. He hadn't had a chance to open it yet. Hearing this, Lo Wenjaw looked at him. Didn't I send you guys to talk to the students? We talked. Xiao Haiyang. Now I want to say Shah Shanan. Xiao Haiyang spread open his notebook. Altogether, there were 6 students who ran away. There are 4 children aside from Feng Bin and Xia Shanan, 3 male and 1 female. The girl is supposed to be running a fever from fright and shock, and wouldn't see us. But we saw the 3 other boys, but none of them gave us any answers. It was as if they'd agreed on their lines in advance. They categorically asserted that they ran away to have fun. When the murder occurred, they were all waiting at the hotel. They didn't know that Feng Bin and Xia Shanan were together, and they didn't know what the 2 of them had gone out for. No one thought about it. I remember there was a fat little boy called Zhang Yifan. Stammers when he talks to strangers. He didn't say anything either. There I go again. Xiao Haiyang shook his head. Wenzhou said, what about the tourist attraction angle? Are there any clues about the fake patrolman? On the night of the crime, Lo Gusheng finished his murder and swaggered away from the scene. Are there any cameras that could have caught where he went after? A few travel-worn criminal police officers shook their heads at the same time. Lowenjo frowned and suddenly stood up, putting on his jacket and making to leave. Lang Chao quickly said, "It's almost time to get off work, boss. Where are you going? Surely it can wait till tomorrow." "I'm going to talk to those students again." Lowenjo drank the tea on the table in one gulp. He knew that when he got off work today, he wouldn't see Feidu in the parking lot across the street, so he held no expectations towards the words, "get off work." "More dead than alive," he said. "When I'm finished talking to them, I'll just drive home." Lang Chao looked at a watch. But Yang Security Uni said their contact person is coming over soon. If you're not here, who's going to sign his transfer order? Lowenjo waved his hand irritably. "Whoever. Who is he to make me wait respectfully to receive him? Don't I have a job? Does he think everyone is as idle as those wretched students? Tell him to come again tomorrow." Before he'd finished, he heard a voice at the door saying, "Is your schedule already full today?" "Oh no." That's not good. Okay, so I wanted to reach page 150, but we technically reached the PDFs, page 150, but not the novels, page 150. So I'm gonna stop it here because I like finishing at the end of chapters if I can. That is very much preferable. It feels much neater that way. So I hope you guys don't mind. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And yeah, I am hoping I'll be able to put up a proper schedule Monday afternoon-ish. Monday afternoon on my side. So maybe like say 10 p.m. GMT, and that'll have the days we're going to be doing lives as well. Aiming for 3, definitely will be doing at least 2. So yeah, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys then. Sajjan.